Vergil was the eldest brother of the twin sons of the Dark Knight Sprada. Sometime before his 8th birthday, his mother Eva gave him and his brother Dante each one half of the perfect amulet. It was also around the same time that Sprada disappeared, and Eva and the twins were left alone only to be attacked by revenge-seeking demons who hoped to harm Sparda's loved ones. Eva was killed, and though Vergil and Dante had survived the initial attack, the two were separated, with Dante believing that Vergil had been killed also. 1 year before the events of Devil May Cry 3, Vergil was approached by a mysterious man named Arkham, who told him of the legend of Temi Negru, and Vergil agreed to work with Arkham in order to raise the Great Tower in order to seek the power that Vergil desired. Over the coming year, Vergil would work with Arkham in order to break the 7 magical seals that kept the Great Tower locked away, and after some time, the two were successful in breaking these seals, and the tower Temi Negru began to rise. Vergil then dispatched Arkham to send his brother Dante an invitation to meet him to see if Dante still had his half of the amulet. After Dante fought his way up the tower in order to meet up with Vergil once again, the two engaged each other. Vergil managed to defeat Dante quite easily and took his half of the perfect amulet. However, in the process, he caused Dante's demonic powers to awaken, making Dante even more powerful. The two would engage each other a couple more times that same day, and even managed to team up in order to take down the now demonically empowered Arkham. However, in their final engagement, for the time being, Vergil would be defeated by Dante and would be trapped in the demon world. While trapped in the demon world, Vergil would encounter Mundus, the Prince of Darkness, and believing that he could defeat Mundus despite being injured, Vergil engaged him, only to be defeated and transformed into Neo Angelo. Years later, Dante would encounter Vergil once again, but would defeat him for the final time, gaining possession of Vergil's half of the perfect amulet. Before his fall from grace, Sephiroth was the most revered and successful warrior of the Shinra Electric Power Company's soldier program. A great warrior idolized by the public and infantrymen alike for his strength and discipline in combat, Sephiroth's many successes on the field of battle during the conflicts surrounding the Shinra Electric Power Company's bid for global domination led to his status as a celebrity war hero and the poster boy for the Shinra military and soldier program. During a standard mission to the mountain town of Nibelheim's Mecha Reactor, Sephiroth would discover the truth behind his creation, and after coming to believe that he was the only remaining survivor of the Ancients, Sephiroth rebelled against the Shinra Electric Power Company and enacted a worldwide vendetta against the corruption of mankind. His ultimate goal was to take control of the Lifestream and with its power become a godlike being. After discovering the remains of his genetic mother Genova inside a Mecha Reactor, it was here that Sephiroth would face the newly promoted first-class soldier Zack Fair. However, after a quick engagement, Sephiroth would defeat Zack, knocking him out, and would return to stand in the presence of his genetic mother. While looking on, Sephiroth would be stabbed in the back by the infantryman Cloud Strife, mortally wounding him. Sephiroth began to regain his footing, and after decapitating his genetic mother's head, began to make his way out of the center core of the Mecha Reactor, where Cloud and an injured Zack Fair would be waiting for him. Cloud picked up Zack's busted sword once again and would attempt to re-engage Sephiroth, but Sephiroth would easily deflect the young Cloud's strike and would impale him on his blade. However, not only did this young infantryman not die, but he somehow managed to build up the strength to lift up Sephiroth and would toss him over the edge into the depths of the Mecha Reactor, supposedly killing Sephiroth. After being labeled as dead for 5 years, Sephiroth would make his return in an attempt to call the Great Meteor to destroy the world. However, after Cloud Strife and his allies discovered Sephiroth's plan, he would track the young flower girl Aerith down, who happened to be a descendant of the Ancients, to the Forgotten Capital, and as she began praying for the Holy, Sephiroth would emerge and would stab Aerith in the back, killing her. As the giant meteor was nearing the planet, Sephiroth would travel into the depths of the planet, but Cloud and his allies would follow and engage him for a final attempt to save the world. And after a long, hard-fought battle, Sephiroth would be defeated, with Cloud Strife delivering the final killing blow, sending Sephiroth's spirit into the Lifestream, where it could do no more harm. Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and I'm here to present my Season 2 versus Series Finale matchup, voted by you, as I will be pitting the Son of Sprada Vergil against the One-Winged Angel Sephiroth. Before I begin, I would just like to state that for both of these combatants, I will be using Vergil as he is shown in both Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry 4, and for Sephiroth, I will be using him as he is shown only in the official Final Fantasy VII canon, spanning from Final Fantasy VII's Crisis Core, Last Order, and Advent Children movie. I will not be acknowledging any of his appearances or any of his combatant feats from any of the Kingdom Hearts games, and on a final note, I'm fully aware that Screw Attack has already tackled this matchup before in the past, and I'm willing to bet that they're already getting ready to tackle this matchup again in the near future. So, in case they decide to come up with a bullshit outcome, I hope this video will serve as a good counter-argument. As you can see from the video's length, I will be going into far more detail than they would ever dream of attempting. So, with all of this out of the way, let us begin, as I will start by comparing these two physically. For most of his appearance in the original Devil May Cry franchise, Vergil was an 18-year-old half-human, half-demon hybrid standing about 6 feet tall, and thanks to the demonic blood that ran through his veins, Vergil was granted a series of enhanced physical properties that would exceed even the most extremely fit of human beings. His durability and endurance were exceptionally high, allowing him to take great deals of punishment over long periods of time. Over that same period of time, Vergil also developed superhuman strength, which allowed him to deal far more damage to his enemies with very little effort. Now, apart from his younger brother Dante, Vergil had developed his body to be able to perform at extremely high speeds. Speeds that were so fast that the average human's eye would not even be able to track his movements, and he could even move so fast that he could literally phase through physical attacks like DC's The Flash. He also maintained a very high level of stamina, allowing him to keep up his combat performance at its highest level for long periods of time. Vergil also had the ability to move his body in specialized ways exclusive to him, thanks to the demonic blood, which gave him highly tuned reflexes, so heightened that he could literally dispatch enemies without them even realizing what had happened. Though Vergil's demonic functions could grant him a healing factor when activated, in his normal state, his physical performance could suffer over the period of a battle if he was not granted the time he needed to heal naturally. This was shown when Vergil was unable to kill Arkham in Devil May Cry 3, when he explained that if Vergil had not taken a beating that day, he could have cut him into confetti. As far as weaknesses, there really aren't any to point out except the fact that although his durability and endurance are exceptionally high, he does have his limits, and if he takes too much damage at one time, he will go down. By the time of his official death, Sephiroth was a 27-year-old human hybrid standing 6'1" with a solid muscular build. While still in his mother's womb, he was injected with Genova cells, and once he was born, though he did not gain the ability to speak to the planet itself like the ancients could, it was decided that he would be developed into becoming the first of a new class of super soldier. Thanks to the Genova cells within his body, he was granted superhuman levels of strength, speed, stamina, reflexes, and endurance. His strength was sufficient enough to cut entire sections of buildings off with very little effort. He has been shown to be able to jump great distances and heights with also very little effort. His speed and reflexes were high enough to allow him to not only engage and defeat entire armies, but also allow him to fight off multiple opponents at once who also shared his superhuman combative traits. His stamina levels were enhanced to the point that Sephiroth never appeared to show any signs of his combative performance weakening at any point during the fight, and could carry on for days, possibly weeks at a time with little to no sleep needed. And though his level of endurance over the course of Final Fantasy VII has been rather inconsistent, shown as he was mortally wounded by a single stab in the back by a Buster Sword in Crisis Core, then was shown to be able to take great deals of punishment during Final Fantasy VII, then practically took no real physical hits during the entire engagement against Cloud Strife and Advent Children until the final moment of that fight. But when you take into account of what it finally took to take this bastard down, it is clear to state that his superhuman levels of endurance and durability would certainly allow him to take great deals of damage over a long period of time, making him one of the toughest combatants of his type in all of Final Fantasy. In terms of their physical capabilities as combatants, Vergil and Sephiroth in their normal states practically match each other point for point. They are both equally young, with Sephiroth only being about 9 years older than Vergil, and with Vergil having the demonic blood of his father Sparda to aid him, and with the use of the Genova cells given to Sephiroth since before he was even born to aid him, they are both equally strong, somewhat equally fast, and they are both equally tough, and neither of them would tire out by any means in the amount of time that an engagement between these two would last. So it is for these reasons I declare Vergil and Sephiroth equals and physical capabilities. Although Vergil was a highly trained swordsman, unlike his brother who chose to reject the willful use of his demonic powers until absolutely necessary, Vergil embraced his demonic powers, and though compared to most top-tier god-level demons, Vergil's demonic powers were somewhat limited, he developed a multitude of creative uses with his demonic powers. His primary projectile power was the ability to summon energy swords that had laser-like precision and could easily lock onto a target, delivering a guaranteed hit, and could cause great deals of damage to an opponent. Vergil's energy swords also had various uses. Not only could Vergil choose to fire them at an opponent with rapid fire sensation, but he could also do this while attacking with any number of his primary melee weapons. He could also summon numerous energy swords at once and fire them all at the same time. He could summon a hailstorm of energy swords to rain down on an opponent, and could even summon a series of stationary swords to surround an opponent and could fire them off at command. Vergil could also use his energy swords in a defensive manner by summoning a series of swords to surround his body, damaging anyone that got close to Vergil. And thanks to Vergil's exceptionally high concentration of demonic power that he had embraced, he had access to an infinite supply of energy swords at his disposal without running the risk of exhausting his own demonic power gauge. Vergil also was able to use his own enhanced physical capabilities in combination with his own powers to automatically teleport directly to an opponent's position, regardless of how far he was from them, allowing him to close distances instantly. Vergil also had the ability to channel his own demonic energy into all of his melee weapons, enabling him to cause even more damage to his opponents at just about any range, regardless of what weapon he was equipped with. However, Vergil's most powerful ability was the use of his Devil Trigger. The Devil Trigger ability allowed Vergil to completely transform his body into his demon form, practically multiplying the efficiency of all his combative capabilities in terms of his speed, endurance, and strength. While in this form, his body would rapidly heal while in use. However, Vergil could only stay in this form for a limited amount of time, and once his demonic power gauge had run out, he would revert back to his normal state. Though Sephiroth was considered by most to have been the greatest member of soldier who ever lived, he himself did not spend a great deal of time developing his skills with the use of magic, but instead chose to focus on being a dedicated swordsman. However, despite his personal choice of combat, he was no less dangerous with his flexible use of magical abilities. After his immersion into the lifestream, he was granted a series of abilities that only amplified his previous magical abilities. He was granted the ability to cast multiple forms of elemental magic spells without the use of materia. However, the spells he could use were somewhat common. He could fly and levitate himself, project illusions into the minds of other beings, and could manifest his Masamune sword at will. Sephiroth also had a very limited control over the physical manifestation of Jenova, allowing him to shapeshift her cells into other forms and act through them as if it was his own original body, which allowed Sephiroth to remain alive even should he be killed. He could also mentally manipulate those who had Jenova cells within their body, and if their mind was weak enough, could even take control of their bodies, shown as he almost made Cloud Strife strike down Aerith while they were both at the Forgotten Capital. Like many other members in Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth did have access to two limit breakers of his own. The first one was dubbed Octaslash, which was a sequence of 8 sword attacks, while his second limit breaker was dubbed Shadow Flare, which allowed Sephiroth to barrage an enemy with dark energy orbs. In the end, though Sephiroth was clearly not the most powerful user of magic within the franchise, it would be a big mistake for anyone regardless of their own strength with magic to underestimate him. Well, this one's pretty easy to call. Sephiroth is undoubtedly strong with his use of magic, but compared to Vergil, he's simply no match for him, both practically and personally. Sephiroth was first and foremost a sword fighter, and chose to achieve his victories with his use of the blade. So despite him having access to magic, it's highly unlikely that he would even want to use it in a contest like this. And should he ever be pushed to the point where he does decide to start using his magical abilities, all of them would have little to no effect against Vergil. His use of magic was so basic that even without the need of materia, he would be unable to hit such a fast-moving target like Vergil, whose own base form speed was not only exceptionally fast, but he could also instantly teleport to Sephiroth's position, cancelling out all of his casting spells. His ability to shapeshift Genova cells will not apply in this contest. His ability to fly and levitate himself to grant him mobility would not help much, since Vergil's ability to instantly teleport to his position, whether on the ground or in the air, is far more efficient. He wouldn't be able to manipulate or take control of Vergil's mind, since his own strength with his demonic powers cancels out such abilities, and even his limit breaker attacks can be defended against, with Octoslash simply being a series of 8 quick slashes, and Shadow Flare could be evaded with Vergil's own base speed. While Vergil's creative offensive and defensive use of his energy swords gives him options in battle, and these swords can be fired in a constant infinite rate while in the midst of combat. And though Sephiroth does have experience deflecting projectile attacks, he has never encountered such a method that could keep up the assault at such a fast rate for an infinite period of time, and the energy sword's ability to lock onto fast-moving targets means that Sephiroth has very little chance of dodging such attacks. He either has to deflect the energy swords of his Masamune sword, or he is getting hit, even if the damage is minimal. And what's worse is that Sephiroth has no real answer to Vergil's Devil Trigger. They match each other dead even in their base forms in terms of their combative performances, but Sephiroth cannot enhance himself like Vergil can. At literally the flip of a switch, Vergil's performance in all his combative departments would multiply by several times. In the end, Sephiroth's unwillingness to develop his use of magic in combat, and inability to really make his limited use of magic count against such a powerful opponent who has spent his entire life embracing his use of demonic powers, practically makes this department unwinnable for Sephiroth, and it is for these reasons that I'm giving Vergil the decisive edge in magical and special abilities. In terms of ornament, Vergil will be bringing 3 different weapons into this contest. His primary weapon was dubbed the Yamato sword, which belonged to his father Sprada. The sword is of katana design with a simple bronze guard at the top of the handle section, and although Yamato does resemble a katana, it is said to be able to cut through anything, and is even sharper than any Japanese blade, and is embedded with tremendous magic. Vergil can also channel his use of demonic powers to strike out at opponents at any range faster than most could react. Vergil also carries the Beowulf, which is a set of flash gauntlets and greaves that Vergil received after defeating Beowulf the Light Beast. The Beowulf multiplies the amount of physical damage that the user can deal to their opponent, and though it is not determined exactly what fighting martial arts Vergil is using while equipped with the Beowulf, it is clear that Vergil is applying some form of up-close kickboxing fighting technique that allows him to dish out fast punches and kicks with great strength and speed, capable of staggering opponents, leaving them open to a follow-up strike. Vergil's third and final weapon was dubbed the Force Edge, which was the second sword that his father Sprada wielded. It looks like any regular blade, however, the Force Edge's true powers were sealed away by the Dark Knight Sprada, and Vergil received this sword temporarily after he and his brother had defeated Arkham in Devil May Cry 3. The Force Edge seems to be of heavy-duty design and meant to be used for heavy power blows, much like his brother Dante's Rebellion sword. Apart from being best used at close ranges for powerful thrusting strikes at opponents, the Force Edge could be used as a projectile weapon, allowing Vergil to fling the Force Edge in a speedy motion and strike it at opponents before returning to Vergil like a boomerang. It is also known that Vergil can use the Force Edge alongside the Yamato sword to resemble a Jarkai style of fighting, allowing him to deliver power, speed, and precision strikes at twice the normal rate while in his base form, and this function would only be greatly increased should Vergil choose to activate his Devil Trigger form. Sephiroth will be bringing only one weapon as disposal, and it is his signature iconic long-spanning sword named the Masamune. The Masamune sword measured at about 7 feet long from the butt of the handle to the tip of the blade, and it was a truly unique weapon that was extremely dangerous to fight against in the hands of Sephiroth. With his years of practice with this weapon, Sephiroth was capable of delivering strength, speed, and precision strikes at a multitude of ranges. The weapon also appeared to have the ability to fire off concentrated energy attacks that gave the weapon a sort of projectile slash, allowing the weapon to attack opponents that were at a distance. But this ability could be easily defended against with well-placed block. The Masamune seemed to also have a unique dark ability that could allow Sephiroth to channel his own dark power into the blade itself, allowing it to instantly kill any normal human who was impaled by this weapon. Though several characters have survived being struck by this weapon, including Tifa when she was a 16-year-old teenager, Zack Fair, and a much younger Cloud Strife who survived even being impaled by this weapon easily. However, from my opinion, the Masamune's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, that being the sword's actual length. It is my belief that due to the length compared to Sephiroth's actual height of 6'1", this weapon was not best used at close ranges. But it has been shown that with practice, Sephiroth was able to use the Masamune at such ranges with some but little difficulty, and has been shown that he could apply a solid defense against multiple strikes at once for a short period of time, but had to immediately jump back in order to decrease the distance between himself and his opponents. The practical use of a long weapon is to keep your opponents as far away from you as possible, and because of this, Sephiroth had to switch between two combative modes while wielding the weapon. At a distance, he would apply a one-handed grip to apply quick speed slashes, but once the opponent closed the distance, he would be forced to grip the weapon with both hands to apply blocks and immediate power counterattacks. It seems that the best use of the Masamune sword was to strike out against multiple opponents at once in wide areas, as most engagements that members of Soldier were trained to deal with were against groups of opponents, and one-on-one engagements were not quite as common. Well, this department is also pretty obvious to call. There is no question that Sephiroth's Masamune sword is a unique weapon, but Vergil is simply bringing more weapons that all have more practical combative uses that Vergil can take advantage of. The only real benefit that Sephiroth's Masamune sword gives him is that it is a very, very, very long sword, and Sephiroth has constantly failed to really take advantage of this physical property of the weapon. What is the point of wielding such a long sword when all of your opponents, regardless of their skill level, have been able to close the distance from within 1 or 2 feet of you? Some would say that Sephiroth uses the length of the sword to force opponents back, but it has been proven that all this does is give an opponent more room to gain momentum in order for them to pounce right back, close the distance once again, forcing Sephiroth back on the defensive. Even Sephiroth's magical uses with the Masamune sword has been very limited and can be easily defended against. His concentrated energy slashes can be easily blocked. The dark functions of being able to kill anyone with a single strike is an ability that takes time to use, and a fast-moving target like Vergil with his skill set would be able to easily evade such an attack. While Vergil not only has more weapons at his disposal, they all have more combative uses. The Yamato sword being a much shorter weapon allows him to operate it more effectively at close ranges, and being able to channel his own demonic energy through the sword allows him to attack his opponents at any range at a much faster rate. The Forest Edge may be classified as a power weapon, but its thrusting ability would allow it to easily close the distance between Vergil and his opponents, even being able to punch through defenses, and the weapon can be thrown and used as a projectile weapon, which will always return back to Vergil and can be used alongside Vergil's Yamato sword. And the practical uses of Vergil's Beowulf, Flash, Gauntlets, and Greaves makes it a very effective close-range weapon, having 4 avenues of attacking and defending. And as stated earlier, Sephiroth has consistently failed to keep his opponents at a distance once they were on the offense, and Vergil's entire collection of weapons would be even more dangerous should Vergil enter his Devil Trigger form, which would allow him to attack with a much more ferocious level, but also enabling him to attack with all his weapons at one time. Ultimately, compared to Vergil's collection of devil arms, the Masamune sword is a one-trick weapon, and with Vergil being able to switch between all of his weapons in the midst of combat, it would force Sephiroth to have to constantly change up his approach to combat, and he would inevitably make mistakes that Vergil would take advantage of, and it is for these reasons that I give Vergil the edge in weapons. Alright guys, you all know how this section is going to work out. Like all my matchups that I've done involving sword and melee weapon users, I will be using Star Wars lightsaber fighting forms to help better describe and illustrate the martial and tactical approaches of both these combatants for this particular matchup. So with that out of the way, in terms of Vergil's martial skills and battle tactics, Vergil was a top-grade master as a combatant, being on par, if not slightly exceeding his brother's level as a fighter even later on into his life. Vergil's unique fighting style was dubbed Dark Slayer, which was designed on focusing on using well-timed power and precision strikes to deliver the maximum amount of damage, along with using specialized evasion movements to either dodge an opponent's attacks or block and immediately counterattack, and its final application was to use demonic powers alongside within his combative maneuvers. As a combatant, Vergil's skill set would have made him a master practitioner in forms 2 Makashi, Form 5 Xian Celeste Gem So, and Form 6 Naiman. He would use Makashi with the use of the Yamato sword, in which this form was designed for blade-on-blade combat and relied on using speed and precision strikes. Makashi was criticized for its lack of kinetic energy to deliver power blows and its inability to respond against more power-focused forms. However, thanks to Vergil's physical properties of being part demon, these were weaknesses that he did not suffer from, and he was more than capable of delivering dedicated power blows with the Yamato sword, along with being able to defend against such dedicated power attacks easily. He would use Form 5 Xian Celeste Gem So with a combination of both the Yamato and Force Edge Blade, in which this form was designed to block projectiles and fire them right back at the shooter with Xian, while the Gem So variation was designed with a Makashi mentality of being tools for blade-on-blade combat, relying on blocking an opponent's attacks then immediately counterattacking. Form 6 Naiman was the moderation form, which opened the door for dual sword wielding, along with allowing users to incorporate the use of force powers within their fighting maneuvers, or, within Vergil's case, the use of demonic powers, and more specifically the use of his energy swords while engaging with his collection of melee weapons. Vergil's only real weakness in terms of his martial and tactical approaches was that he had a very difficult time fighting effectively if he was placed in a stagnant engagement. However, this could only take place if he was facing someone who had an intimate knowledge of all of his techniques and had a proper response to all of them, causing Vergil to get more frustrated as the fight draws on, in which, in this case, Vergil would start making more mistakes as he got more aggressive. This is why Dante is such a perfect opposite to Vergil. Over the course of the 3 battles in Devil May Cry 3, Dante was not only getting stronger with his demonic powers, but he was getting very familiar with Vergil's typical combative approach, forcing Vergil to have to change up over time to the point that by their 3rd engagement, Dante had a perfect counter to everything Vergil could throw at him, turning Vergil into nothing more than a straightforward power offensive fighter, which is exactly the type of fighting that Dante was clearly the superior user of, which ultimately led to Vergil's defeat. In the world of Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth was easily declared as the greatest member of soldier who had ever lived, despite the number of official members of such a group being very small. Sephiroth spent his entire combative career developing and becoming one of the greatest users of the blade within the entire Final Fantasy franchise. His entire approach to combat was based on using his Masamune sword at extremely high speeds in order to dispense large groups of enemies quickly, or to completely overwhelm a single opponent with such a high concentrated fury offense that their defense would be completely destroyed. However, Sephiroth was not some rage-filled berserker who could only operate using a fury barrage of attacks, but he was easily capable of applying a well-maintained defense along with applying precision slashes and piercing attacks to take advantage of any openings an opponent could leave open. Based on these traits, Sephiroth would have been a master practitioner in Forms 1 Seicho, Forms 2 Makashi, and Form 4 Ataru. Seicho with its wide sweeping strikes made it perfect to deal with multiple opponents at once, either in a controlled area or out on the battlefield. However, its moveset made it terrible against a single well-trained opponent, as its moveset left several openings that an opponent could exploit. And for Sephiroth, this makes sense, as all of his engagements he has been seen immediately jumping back to increase the distance once an opponent got too close. He would use Form 2 Makashi, which would allow him to use precision-based attacks to either bypass an opponent's defense or take advantage of any openings that they would provide. And though this form was specifically designed for sword-to-sword engagements and its lack of kinetic energy attacks within its movesets lacked power, thanks to Sephiroth's physical properties with his strength, he was more than capable of applying power blows within his maneuvers. However, it was with his use of Form 4 Ataru and its heavy reliance on speed-based fury attacks that made Sephiroth extremely dangerous to engage, as his high velocity of speed strikes could immediately force just about any combatant to either fall back to increase the distance or force them to immediately have to go on the defense, and any combatant who lacked mobility or could not hold a strong enough defense for an indefinite period of time had no chance of lasting long against Sephiroth. Ataru's greatest weakness was that its high velocity of attacks made the form extremely tiring, burning out through users' stamina in no time. But again, thanks to his physical properties, this granted Sephiroth nearly infinite supply of stamina, meaning that Sephiroth could keep up this fury-like assault as long as he wished without running the danger of tiring out. However, despite molding his skill set to make him an overwhelming combatant, his approach to combat was not entirely foolproof, and he did suffer from two distinct weaknesses. The first being his own arrogance and his overbloated ego. In his mind, Sephiroth was the greatest warrior the world had ever seen, and therefore believed that no one could realistically challenge him, causing Sephiroth to constantly underestimate his opponents. But Sephiroth's greatest weakness, that led to him being defeated on multiple occasions, was his terrible reaction time to new maneuvers or new abilities that he was not expecting or had any knowledge of how to respond. It was this notion that led to two of his defeats by Cloud Strife's hands. In their first encounter, after Sephiroth had successfully impaled Cloud, he simply assumed that he would die right then and there, but he was not expecting that a simple infantryman was able to overpower him and throw him aside, leading to his first defeat. And in his final engagement against Cloud, after Sephiroth had successfully countered Cloud's ultimate move, the Omi Slash, which led to Cloud being impaled once again, but as Cloud attempted to use the maneuver one more time, Sephiroth was preparing to counter the same maneuver, but again he was caught off guard by a new variation of the technique that he had no idea how to counter, and therefore by the time he realized what was happening, it was already too late. Comparing Sephiroth to another character from another franchise, Sephiroth as a fighter was the Darth Maul of the franchise. Instead of balancing his combative skills between his use of the blade and his magical abilities, or force abilities in Maul's case, he simply put all of his focus into his swordsmanship while only applying his magic or force abilities in very basic ways. As a swordsman, he is perfectly capable of fighting off multiple opponents at once. He is tactically capable of leading fights to locations of his own choice and wearing his opponents down and exploiting openings in an opponent's maneuvers, and he's perfectly capable of meeting powerful offensive head-to-head and responding with his own. But if he is ever caught off guard, even if it's for a single moment, Sephiroth's lack of a good reaction time to a new maneuver or technique that he is not expecting will lead to his defeat every single time. This department is by far the most complicated to call. However, there is a clear winner. There is no question that in terms of their martial skills as swordsmen, Vergil in his base form and Sephiroth are complete equals. They would match each other strike for strike, blow for blow, and Sephiroth would have very little difficulty dealing with all the unique weapons that Vergil has at his disposal, with him only needing to make slight modifications in order to respond. But it is with their use of their battle tactics and who can exploit the other's weaknesses easier that ultimately determines the winner of this department. And unfortunately for Sephiroth, he is not bringing enough flexible and creative combative might to match Vergil. Again, as swordsmen, they would be equals, but Sephiroth's unwillingness to properly integrate the use of his magic alongside his skills with the blade put him at a serious disadvantage. The multiple uses of Vergil's energy swords alone would require no less than all of Sephiroth's attention, because he would not know the extent to which these energy swords can be applied, and he does not have a projectile counter maneuver at his disposal that would enable him to deflect all of the energy swords being fired at him and contend with Vergil at the same time. And what's worse is that he has absolutely no counter maneuver that would allow him to fend off Vergil's Devil Trigger form at point blank range. The majority of this fight would have Vergil go head to head with Sephiroth for an extended period of time to get Sephiroth comfortable at fighting him in his base form, making it appear that he is fighting at his max. Then he would start applying his unique functions of the energy swords into his demonic powers in order to see exactly how Sephiroth reacts. And Vergil would then begin to realize that Sephiroth is having a difficult time contending with all of Vergil's base form combative attacks. Then, at the proper moment, Vergil would then activate his devil trigger right in Sephiroth's face, not giving him the time to react. And with Sephiroth having no idea how much Vergil's combative might has multiplied, the fight would be over before Sephiroth realized what had happened. To defeat Vergil in a martial and tactical sense, you simply need to have a proper response to every combative technique that he is bringing, and simply keep him there in check and not allow him to dictate the pace of the fight. If you can keep him there long enough, he will begin to get frustrated. As he gets more frustrated, he'll become more aggressive. As he becomes more aggressive, he'll begin making mistakes, and when he does eventually make those mistakes, all one needs to do is exploit them and wear Vergil down mistake by mistake. And as a martial fighter and combative tactician, this is the one method that Sephiroth has no chance of applying against Vergil, and it is for these reasons that I give Vergil the edge in martial skills and as a battle tactician. I'm sure by now many of you can see the reality of this matchup. Despite giving Vergil most of the edges in this match, it would certainly push these two combatants to their limits. But when all is said and done, this fight is simply one that Sephiroth, even with his reputation, cannot possibly win in his current state. Physically, they are combative equals, but Sephiroth's choice to focus on his swordsmanship and neglect the use of his magic means that Vergil's ability to integrate his demonic powers within his melee attacks, while also being able to fire off an infinite supply of energy swords and creative means that all have laser-like precision while attacking, grants Vergil an automatic advantage over Sephiroth. So much so that even Sephiroth's limit breaker attacks would be of little use, as his Octaslash allows Sephiroth to attack slightly faster for a quick barrage, with Vergil being able to easily defend against, and Shadow Flare simply allows him to fire a series of dark orbs at Vergil, which he could easily evade or defend against by teleporting or simply summoning a circle of rotating energy swords to protect himself without having to slow down. Sephiroth's Masamune sword may look intimidating with its length, but Sephiroth has consistently used this weapon in an impractical fashion. If he is using a 7-foot-long sword, why is he letting people get within 2 feet of him? While Vergil not only has more physical weapons at his disposal, he has developed much more creative means in order to use them alongside his demonic powers. As martial swordsmen, they may be equals, but Vergil is far more superior with how he plans out how he will use all of his combative capabilities that would ultimately allow him to control the fight without Sephiroth even knowing it. And when Vergil ultimately pulls his trump card, the Devil Trigger form, Sephiroth will have neither the time nor the response in order to deal with such an overwhelming powerful form. Now, in order to stave off the Final Fantasy fanboys and girls, I am in no way classifying Sephiroth as weak or being a simple-minded character. His skills with the blade are nearly unrivaled. His use of magic may be somewhat limited, but it is stronger than most, and his reputation within the Final Fantasy franchise is well earned. Put this man in a one-on-one fight against nearly any of the almost 100 playable characters from Final Fantasy 1 all the way to Final Fantasy 12, and he would annihilate most of them in less than a minute. And from that list of characters, in my opinion, only perhaps 5 characters could realistically challenge him. And from those 5, apart from Cloud Strife, there are only 2 other characters who I will not be mentioning in this video that could actually walk up to Sephiroth, bitch slap him, challenge him to a fight, and successfully take Sephiroth down. And even when they do, Sephiroth would fuck them up before he went down. But this matchup serves as a perfect example of what happens when you take 2 elite combatants who operate in 2 very different worlds and have developed themselves under very different circumstances and put them against each other. Sephiroth is without question one of the most dangerous antagonists in the entire Final Fantasy franchise, but he is far from being, in my opinion, a top-tier threat, as there are several other main antagonists in the Final Fantasy franchise that completely eclipse him in terms of their rate of combative devastation. And once you take Sephiroth outside the Final Fantasy franchise, you will not have a hard time finding characters in other franchises that are more than capable of taking Sephiroth down even on his best day. Now let's set up this fight. Let's say this takes place in the underworld of Hades, and the Greek god of death himself has set up a tournament in which the winner will be allowed to return to the land of the living, with Vergil and Sephiroth being the final 2 combatants. This entire fight will be decided over 3 stages. The first stage will simply have the 2 of these guys engage each other in their basic skills with their use of their bladed weapons, with Sephiroth using the Masamune sword and Vergil using the Yamato. At this point, the 2 of them are just getting a feel for each other's skill level, and it really wouldn't go anywhere. They would simply acknowledge each other as equals with their blade, and neither of them would underestimate the other from this point on. As we enter the second stage, the 2 would begin using their unique special abilities. Sephiroth would expand his wing and start taking flight and begin flying around the arena, and would dish out a series of long-range sword swipes at Vergil, but Vergil would easily deflect all the slashes that head his way with very little effort. Now at this point, Vergil could easily just teleport up to Sephiroth's immediate position and knock him out of the sky. Being the calculated tactician that he is, he decides to run a little test. He begins firing a high rate of energy swords at Sephiroth while he's in flight, and notices that Sephiroth, even with his exceptional speed, cannot move fast enough in order to evade all of them, and is forced to have to deflect them with his sword while in flight. Sephiroth attempts to retaliate by firing off a series of his own magical spells at Vergil, but he simply responds with a combination of teleporting and phasing through Sephiroth's spells, showing Sephiroth that he is too quick with such an underpowered technique. While still in flight, Sephiroth decides to fire off his Shadow Flare Limit Breaker, firing a series of dark orbs at Vergil, but he simply counters by summoning a circle of energy swords around himself and fires them off in every direction, deflecting all of Sephiroth's dark orbs. Following this, Vergil then teleports up to Sephiroth's position while he's in the air and knocks him back to the ground, and as he comes down, he actually manages to cut off Sephiroth's angel wing, preventing him from being able to take flight again, keeping Sephiroth ground locked. Vergil then follows up with a combination of switching between his Beowulf Flash Gauntlets and Greaves and his Yamato Sword and Force Edge dual combination, and despite Sephiroth being a little hurt, he is able to easily defend himself with little to no difficulty. The 2 would then jump away from each other in order to give themselves distance, and it is at this point that the climax and final stage of their fight would take place. At this point, Sephiroth would be kinda pissed off that he lost his wing, and has been proven that his use of magical abilities have been rendered all but useless, and him being unable to really get anywhere with the use of his sword. This is the only point during a fight that I believe that they would exchange words. With anger in his voice, Sephiroth would yell out, "That's it, now you die." And Vergil, with his calm, stained voice, would simply reply, That's funny. I was about to say the same thing to you." The 2 would begin to charge at each other, with Sephiroth initiating his Octa/Slash Limit Breaker, which will enable him to attack faster than normal, and at the same time, as the distance between the 2 begins to close, Vergil then summons a circle of energy swords in order to surround Sephiroth, causing him to lose focus, recognizing that he is about to get hit with a series of swords that are moving with him and are locked onto his immediate position and are merely inches away from his body. As his focus falls into the energy swords, Vergil then activates his Devil Trigger form, while equipped with his Beowulf Greaves and Flash Gauntlets and the Yamato Sword and the Force Edge in each hand. As he does this, he releases the energy swords, thereby staggering Sephiroth, and now moving several times faster than before, he bombards Sephiroth with a lightning speed combination of kick and sword slashes to Sephiroth, and keeps up this assault until his Devil Trigger form expires. When the dust clears, Vergil simply walks away from his now cut down and defeated opponent, and thus I declare Vergil, the son of Sparda, the winner. And that'll do it for my Season 2 Versus Series finale. Now, of course, this verdict is just my own personal opinion, so don't feel too bad if your favorite One-Winged Angel just got his ass handed to him. Please feel free to share your own thoughts and opinions with me in the comments down below, and please remember to be respectful in the comments. I do these videos for fun, not to create conflicts. And if you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe to track me in my future Versus Series matchups and other videos I upload, and tell me which matchup from Season 2 is your favorite. Like always, thank you guys for watching, you're all awesome, and just to say thank you, here's a quick preview of the first matchup to kick off Season 3 of my 3TR Versus Series coming soon. Please enjoy, and I'll see you next time.